Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be continuing our discussion on the situation on Palestinian territories. With us this evening is Dr. محمد الحليم, Professor of Political Science. A pleasure to have you with us. There's a meeting this coming Thursday, UN Security Council meeting. What are we expecting from that meeting, taking into account that in the previous meetings, in this conflict which is reaching almost 2 weeks now, the United States vetoed a decision to stop the ceasefire, to asking Israel to stop its aggression. Egypt proposed an initiative which was accepted, and finally we see a temporary cessation of the aggression. But what are we expecting from that meeting this coming Thursday, and will we see another veto by the US?
Right. As it stands, it seems to be quite, we are taking very good steps towards initiating peace in the Middle East, actually, as being forward and prepared by the sort of the initiative and the 5,000 million American dollars, actually, that had been paid as a sort of funding, as much as pacifying and rebuilding and reconstructing,
yes,
the sort of the demolition and devastating as a strip, which is a sign of goodwill in our own political authority, actually. Sort of a thing that had been praised to a greater extent by Joe Biden in the first instance, and the foreign minister as well. It was very much praising that sort of initiative on the part of our own President, Mr. Fattah al-Sisi, actually to a greater extent, as a sign of pacifying and preparing the way for almost bringing the tussles to a 0 point, actually, I would say, in much the same way that it's a sign of goodwill, actually, on an international arena to the UN Security Council, actually, that I would really think that in the next Thursday, it would be to a greater extent suggesting and implementing the sort of the two-state solution as a sort of a plan that had been derelict for quite a long period of time during the previous period of the American administration of Donald Trump, actually. And
so this coming meeting is going to be about discussing a two-state solution?
Well, I think part of it actually will be dedicated, actually, insofar as the foreign minister, actually, in his own inauguration of a little talk yesterday with Netanyahu, actually, was frowning on and upon, actually, that sort of an extreme sense of demolition. So I would really anticipate that the sort of the examination of the topic will be paraded to a greater extent. And so far as, the American administration a couple of days ago, started to rechange its own attitudes and its own proposals, as much as the language of communication and the language of initiation. In the meantime, with the presidency of the Egyptian political authority to a greater extent, we have had a very successful maneuver of the Nile Protector 1 and 2 in Sudan, a sort of thing that will inevitably, actually, turn the whole status into something actually into the right direction and the positive way. For one thing, in a phone call actually yesterday, Joe Biden praised and did thank actually President Fattah al-Sisi for his own initiation and his own very much peaceful inaugurating steps to pacifying the tussles, actually, and reaching to what you might call a truce, a ceasefire, actually, to a greater extent, despite the fact that in the Western Bank there are some tussles, some arrests, and some criminalization, actually, of certain situations. But I would really anticipate the fact that parts of the agenda that will be examined and discussed to a greater extent next Saturday in the UN Security Council will be dedicated, actually, to foreshadowing and touching on and upon the sort of rediscussing and re-examining again the two-state solution, particularly, actually, it's a sort of a nightmarish aspect that had been there for quite a long time, particularly during the previous American administration, Donald Trump, actually, with his own removal of the American embassy to Jerusalem, as much as declaring Jerusalem as the permanent capital of Israel, was demolishing almost all the prospects in the Middle East of reaching to what you might call a meeting point, through the aid of which you can reach to a consensus of opinion of re-establishing a Palestinian state on the one side, headed by Jerusalem, headed by, I would really say Jerusalem, or the Eastern Jerusalem, and the other states actually dedicated to Israel. So I would really anticipate some promising touches actually, apart from the veto and the rights of the American side actually to try to give the power as much as the sense of defending itself, so to speak, on the part of the Israeli troops. But I would really say that there are some lenient steps on the part of Biden towards actually, I mean, the negative steps and the peaceful initiations and the very much charitable steps that had been taken by our own presidential authority during the last week, actually by reaching to a ceasefire as much as a truce on 2 p.m. Last Friday, I would say.
Why, even if the Security Council sits there and discusses a two-state solution, do you see Israel willing the Israeli government willing to compromise, willing to work at achieving this two-state solution? Because the grounds of the so-called two-state solution definitely are not something that will be acceptable to the Palestinian side.
Of course, I mean, our own demands, as much as the Palestinian side demand actually, is to retreat and to withdraw actually to the border lines of 1967, the 4th of June, as much as the matter of returning and again for the refugees and the peaceful terms and the issue of the water, as much as the stoppage actually of the expansion of the settlements. These are unquestioning actually demands on the Palestinian side that would never ever change by time, as much as representing every now and again a Palestinian state headed by Jerusalem. Actually, this is our own simple right as much as theirs. The sort of the thing that had been for quite a long period of time throughout a large number of negotiations did fail and reached to a fiasco point. But the fact remains that I would really think that it's one way or another on the part of the Israeli negotiator, particularly Netanyahu actually, to try to seize the chance and to protract and prolong his own possible chances of success actually, particularly the, his own chances actually within winning the next elections would seem to be very much minimized to a greater extent. So I'd really say that he would seize the chance of representing his signs of goodwill as much as his own ability actually to reach to a consensus of opinion by reaching to a meeting point at the orders actually of the American administration, just by way of getting very much successful steps towards achieving what you might call a winning step towards the achievement of his own cabinet as foreign minister again, as a prime minister, I would say. So, I mean,
what kind of a two-state solution would the American administration be supporting?
Well, America and the
because this is the only power really that can influence the Israeli government. What kind of a two-state solution would they see?
We wouldn't deny the sort of leniency on the American administration, no matter that sort of administration may be, present, past, previous, or coming, I would say. Almost every now and again there is an insistence on, strengthening as much as fortifying the Israeli case. The sort of the thing that Joe Biden did say a couple of days ago, that we are behind Israel. He said it so straightforwardly and so directly that we are fortifying the existence and Israel as a sort of a strategic ally behind the NATO has its own possible right to try to defend itself with all possible means at its own disposal. In much the same way that he did send a large number of ammunitions and weaponries, actually, of modern means of technology and technological aspects to Israel. This is a clear testimony to the fact that he is saying in the real sense of the word, with his own full voice, actually, that I am always behind Israel, here, there, and everywhere. The sort of the thing that had been taken and endorsed by the previous American administration and would be suggested in the due course of time. And as such, I would really say that they are always there behind Israel, in much the same way that what would turn the whole issue a bit problematic at the fact that the sort of the veto and the simple right of the United States of America to represent, to react, and to deny, and to select and reject what sort of decision that it would like to say at the end of the day, which is the establishment and expansion of the settlements of the Israelis' existence within the Middle East. This is one thing. At another, actually, there is another attempt on the part of the American administration to try to pacify the sort of the thing to outward seeming. I would say, I mean, deep down, they have got a certain agenda that would seem to be quite different from what was to be propagated. The fact that, as I just said, that, you know, I mean, the previous American administration represented that, you know, the sort of the tie that what connected the American administration with Israel is by no means inseparable tie, which is a permanent one indeed. And being a sort of a land of constitutions and institutions, the United States of America would never ever change its own strategy towards establishing and fortifying the Israelis' existence within the Middle East. That's why I would really say they would protect and prolong the amount of initiations and discussions on political terms, sometimes devastate Gaza Strip, sometimes reconstructing it again, sometimes initiating the sort of rebuilding and re-establishing the sort of the American consulate at Jerusalem, sometimes actually initiating the sort of the two-state solution. But I would really say and insist on saying the fact that at the end of the day, they would never ever reach to a consensus of opinion because they have got a certain religious agenda at their own mind, which is being there for quite a long period of time, standing the amount of struggle, the sort of the kingdom that would have to be very much protected from Euphrates to the River Nile. The sort of the thing that seems to be quite looming large nowadays.
We have with us on the phone His Excellency Minister محمد Arabi, former Minister of Foreign Relations or Foreign Affairs. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Your Excellency, this coming Thursday, the UN Security Council will be holding a meeting pertaining to the situation on Palestinian territories. What kind of a breakthrough, if any, are we expecting from that meeting, since the previous ones really have not achieved much?
Well, from my previous experience, you know, with the last session, I don't think we should, you know, expect any concrete resolutions from the Security Council in this stage, because I think the United States is now preferring to have this kind of bilateral negotiation and contacts with different parties in the region. And the Secretary Blinken, I think he starts, you know, these efforts today, and he will resume it for the next few days. So I think the Security Council will not be keen, you know, to have any resolution in this stage, because, you know, we have always the American veto and some other countries, they are always, you know, reluctant to condemn what happened in Gaza. So I guess the process which will start now by the Americans, of course, to support the Egyptian initiatives and our efforts to have this kind of ceasefire in Gaza, I think it will continue, and we will show. Maybe the Security Council also will try to discuss how to cement, you know, this ceasefire. But I don't see any resolutions put any blame on Israel and try to criticize what they did for the last few days. So I don't expect, you know, a lot from the Security Council now in this stage, because I think the United States is keen to have or to resume these efforts to pave the way maybe for a comprehensive discussion between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
What about footing the bill? I mean, Egypt is contributing, Saudi Arabia contributed. Today, the United States is contributing $75 million to rebuild Gaza. What about the Israeli share in all this? I mean, this is not the first time that Gaza is damaged. What about their contribution to footing the bill of destroying civilian sites, civilian facilities, including even creating a humanitarian crisis? Because when you destroy the only lab that tests for corona or COVID-19 in Gaza, this is a real catastrophe at this time. What about the Israeli share of footing that bill?
Well, I think I support what you are saying, but in the meantime, Israel always, claimed from the last and the previous, engagements between the two sides that they are providing Gaza Strip with electricity and water, and this is what we can do. And but for the process to reconstruct the Gaza Strip, I think Israel will not contribute in materials, because they always put even problems in the checkpoints for all this, the reconstruction materials, which is coming from Egypt and from other countries.
Yes.
So what we can ask them now is to facilitate the process, how we can, supply humanitarian supplies and medical supplies, and also the material which will be used, to reconstruct the country, our Gaza Strip. So I don't expect the Israelis, to have any sort of contribution in this case, as they always claim that we are providing Gaza with electricity and water, and I think this is our contribution, to keep, people there alive.
The meeting this coming Thursday, the gentleman with me in the studio is saying one of the issues that would be under discussion is a two-state solution. Do we have fertile ground right now to even discuss a two-state solution?
Yes, but it's a long way. I don't, let us not, try to exaggerate the results of what happens on the ground for the last few days, and we can say, okay, people, we have now, we already, tackling the nitty-gritty of the issue, and let us embark on a peace process negotiation. I think it will still have, a very long way. We still have, the problem of Hamas in the region, how people will accept the engagement of Hamas, will be part of the new government of the Palestinian Authority. So we have still a lot of problems. And maybe the last, let us say, press conference which occurred today between Blinken and Netanyahu, he didn't actually mention anything about the two-state solution. He was talking about how we can assist Gaza and to cement the ceasefire between the two sides. So I guess we have to wait for maybe some time in order to organize the Palestinian side, which I think is very crucial, thing to have one Palestinian voice in order to be engaged in a real peace process in the future.
Mm-hmm. Your Excellency, Minister Mohammed Arabi, thank you very much for your input. $75 million pledged by the United States today to rebuild Gaza, in addition to 30-something million that will be given to the UN Agency for the Relief of Palestinians. I mean, quite a lot of money. Yet, a few days ago, the US, the same party that is donating this money, is also refused to endorse a ceasefire or a halt of violence and aggression by the Israeli side. How come?
Well, this is not the first time, actually, that the Israeli troop would attack Gaza Strip.
No, it's not. This is the third time that it's destroyed.
Previous episodes, actually, every now and again, that would celebrate the fact that they're always there, actually, for the demolition of the infrastructure, with almost all the possible means at their own disposal. This is one thing. But one main fundamental fact that we'd have to be very much aware of, the fact that the sort of the firm relationship, actually, of the vast demolition and the devastation of the infrastructure of Gaza Strip and its own connection, actually, with the establishment and the ability of refilling the Renaissance Dam, I would really say. It's one way or another, actually, on the part of the Israeli troop, as much as the American administration, to try to distract the attention of the armed forces of our own Egyptian armed forces, actually, of trying, actually, to devastate or even to dissipate its own force and its own ability and potentiality in something else that seems to be quite to outward seeming something, and the essence is something which is totally different, I'd really say. There is an attempt on an international agenda on the part of the Israeli side, as I've just said, as much as to try to dissipate our own efforts in re-pacifying and re-initiating as much as safeguarding our own border lines, particularly with Gaza. Our own existence in there is very much in our own interests, to our own interests. It's to our own interests that we may be there actually to try to solve the problematic situation and the problems actually of the tunnels on the one side, as much as re-establish our own existence in Gaza Strip in a way that would propagate for almost all the international community that we can reach to our own possible means and ends actually whenever we would really like to. And immediately after the declaration actually of Mr. President Fattah Sisi of threatening voice, I would really say, for almost all the Israeli troops that on no means any possible Red Cross ambulance actually should be attacked, which would underline and signify the fact that it's an attempt on the part to devastate and attack the Egyptian armed forces, the sort of the thing that will initiate and will ask and demand for retaliation. Only at this little point actually of representing our own real message actually, of our own ability to safeguard our own borderlines as much as defend our own soldiers and our own safe existence actually from that sort of the land, it would give us also an impression of the fact that how the Israeli people are very much panicked actually of almost all the sorts of the messages, particularly actually in one respect, one of the speeches of His Own Excellency Mr. Fattah Sisi said that any sort of disturbance within the area will turn the whole Middle East into a chaotic experience actually that would leave actually nothing alive. And one other respect, he did say that when the elephants would struggle in the jungle, actually it will put an end for almost all greeneries and all the bushes and all the little trees. It's a little significance actually in here that actually it would represent our own ability actually to supervise as much as to defend our own territories as much as those adjacent ones actually to our own borderlines, in much the same way that it's one way or another actually of representing our own peaceful initiations and peaceful ties and our own diplomatic ways and means through the aid of which we would be able actually to put an end for almost all the possible tussles actually, even those of the Renaissance Dam as much as the attack on the Gaza Strip.
Yes. It's worth noting that this time in the United States, some young people are actually questioning their administration's, the extent of their administration's support of Israel. Is that a shift, or will that cause a shift in how the U.S. foreign policy is applied in this region? Because we didn't see young people questioning how the United States is supporting the Jewish state.
Right. During the previous periods, actually, it was a sort of blind acceptance as much as endorsement, actually, of almost all the rights, no matter how visual or even far from being, just actually the implementation of the Israeli side for quite a long period of time. But this is the first time, actually, that you can really find sort of demonstrations, actually, in Israel among the civilians who would hail and propagate and praise the name of President Fattah Sisi, actually, for the sort of the inauguration, actually, towards putting an end for the tussles and the struggles, because a large number of the Israeli people, not only in Israel, but actually living, in America and elsewhere in some other parts, actually, of the world, they are very much panicked and terrified by the sort of the sirens and the sort of the attacks and the bombs, no matter how very much minimize the ability of the Hamas bombs actually to devastate the infrastructure of the Israeli land. But to a greater extent, they are very much horrified the sort of the iron canopy actually that had been there for quite a long period of time, propagating the invincible sort of power on the part of the Israeli side is being demolished to a greater extent by the sort of these very much little mesmerizing rockets actually on the part of Hamas. In much the same way, that's the invincible, mythology actually of the Israeli side was to be wholly devastated during the 6th of October war.
Yes.
So to international arena, the youngsters, the people actually, even those new generation actually, for the first time they start actually to look on Israel not only as an invader actually, but actually as a sort of a land that is based actually on not emancipation, not on liberty and equality and the sort of the things that it would propagate every now and again, but actually on the fact that it is almost there actually taking seizure of almost the lands that is not theirs, taking the rights of people that are not belonging to them.
Worth noting a headline that was actually in one of the Israeli newspapers that I find quite mind-boggling is that it says that over 500 Biden campaign staffers urge him to hold Israel accountable.
Yeah.
So it's not just people in the street, but the fact that some of his own staffers, the people that helped put him in the White House, are asking him to hold Israel accountable.
Yeah, that's right. After the sort of the lack of popularity to a great extent and the devastation of the existence of Netanyahu actually within the Israeli street, and the attacks on his own sense of disloyalty, as much as he's being quite, asked in the courts actually on account of a large number of crimes. The least of them is bribery actually, would give us another impression and a clear testimony to the fact that the popularity is being eroded to a greater extent. This is at one thing. At another, I would really represent the fact that Theodor Herzl's actually belief during 50 years ago of the establishment of the Israeli state, east and west and south and north actually, and fortifying its own existence, despite the fact that it is to be assumed and fortified and fulfilled to a greater extent, and despite the fact that Bernard Lewis's, belief of the Arab Spring was to be, one permanent fact actually in the Middle East. But I think tables would seem to be quite turning actually to a greater extent to some new dimension, to some new negative steps towards unifying the Arab forces. Particularly the sort of the visit of the Qatari, vice foreign minister actually, and the sort of the returning again in diplomacies and in soft policies and reuniting again with Arab. I think that there is a spirit actually that is looming large in the Middle East to be able to unify almost all the Arab countries actually to a greater extent, just by way of achieving one peaceful, unifying force that would somehow or another actually be able to say something significant rather than being nothing, I would really say.
During the raids in Gaza, one of the buildings destroyed housed offices of leading media bureaus.
Yeah.
Worth noting as well, we see, and I'm quoting here from Israeli newspapers, not from American or even Egyptian ones, WhatsApp blocks accounts of Gaza-based journalists. At the same time, some journalists were saying that their shows criticizing Israel have been removed from YouTube. Your comment?
Well, I would really say that there is an attempt on the part of the Israeli troop to try to mystify and to hide a large number of facts and factual details about the atrocities and about the scandalous affairs, about, their own, to outward seeming peaceful means of spreading peace, but to outward seeming they are meaning at reaching to something else, which is the vast demolition as much as the expansion within the Palestinian territories. What would seem to be quite very much representing the right side of the Israelis' existence, with its own atrocities in the Middle East, is, I think, the attitude that is to be taken by our own presidential authority last few days, and the ability of reaching to a ceasefire and of implementing a sense of truth. The fact that our own agenda is straightforward, our own schematic program is very much direct, and
Yes.
very much clear. We don't have the scandalous affair of Tal Zatar. We don't have, the besiege of the Palestinians in Zahla, nor even Sabra and Shatila, actually. All these things would seem to be very much far away from our own administration to a greater extent. Well, at one time, I mean, Mr. Abdel Sisi, our own president, did say so straightforwardly the fact that we have lost during the 70 previous years, actually, more than 1,000, martyrs, actually, to a greater extent.
Yes.
On a daily basis, actually. It had been there, part and parcel of our own strategy. It's a strategic existence into our own essence of the land, and we would never, ever discard the sort of the Palestinian cause and any conceivable respect, the sort of thing that had been clarified by the previous negative steps on the part of Mr. Abdel Sisi's existence in there, of sending two high military official delegations, actually, one in Jerusalem and the other in Tel Aviv, actually,
Yes.
just by way of pacifying and of assisting as much as preserving
Yes.
the sort of the ceasefire and the sense of truth that we have reached to.
We have with us on the phone Mr. Sameh Abdullah, Assistant Editor-in-Chief in Al-Ahram newspaper. Can you hear us?
Yes, hi, how are you?
Yes. Good evening, sir. Are you expecting any breakthrough in the tense relations between Palestinians and Israelis? I mean, we have a ceasefire initiated by Egypt, but will we see any progress diplomatically to reach a two-state solution anytime soon?
Yes, I'm expecting, of course, a lot of efforts to be done during the coming days, weeks, and months.
Yes.
And due to what has happened in Gaza during the last few weeks, as you know, of course, and everybody knows, Gaza went through some kind of military engagement with Israel. That was not the first time. Perhaps we had it 3-4 times before during the last 15-20 years. But this time it was different because it was not only people in Gaza that were suffering a lot,
Yes.
but Israelis living all over Israel, went through an experience that they haven't seen before. They had to look for shelters for days, and they were hearing bombs, and they were not feeling secure. So this situation have rang several bells, not only inside Israel or in our region, but even worldwide, United States and Europe and everybody. And they realized that such a situation is getting deteriorating. The coming war, in case it would happen in 2 years, most probably people in Gaza will have more accurate missiles, and they will be able to threaten Israelis in a more severe way. So such a situation cannot last forever, even for those who care about the security of Israel. And it became very clear that Israelis will never feel secure unless everybody else in the area is feeling secure, the same amount of security. That's why, the old idea was raised up again. And I'm talking about, the two-state solution, and everybody's speaking about it because this is the only way for everybody to live in peace, prosperity. But thinking of me only having security while others doesn't, this is only hallucination that cannot be a reality.
Will Netanyahu accept a two-state solution that is not his way of seeing things, if we can put it that way? Will he accept, I wouldn't say compromise, because he's not the one that's compromising really, it's the Palestinian side, but will he see eye to eye with Palestinian needs when it comes to that issue?
I don't think so, or even if certain changes will be done, I'm not expecting it to be done in few hours or few days. As you know, it has been a very long conflict, and there is a lot of ideology and a lot of, I would say, even myth, but strong, and on the Israeli side, they believe this is the land that has always been the land for thousands of years, and they have the right to do so and so, and to occupy whatever they want, and so this kind of mentality, I'm not expecting it to turn 180 degrees in few days, but I'm sure they are right now trying to recalculate everything, and a lot of issues that were taken for granted before, like Israel is very powerful. Israel can do whatever they want to do. They can confront all the Arab countries and win a war, and Palestinians can do nothing. All these ideas that are very well established in the Israeli mentality, I think they are under revision right now, and they will have to realize that Israel is not at its best right now. Has been very powerful before. They are not anymore right now. They are losing the edge year after year. So they have to pay the price if they really want to live in peace in our area. And I believe Americans and others can help Israelis to change their mentality and accept a fair solution where everybody will have his own state and live in secure and eliminate all kinds of atrocities and threats wherever it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Sameh Abdullah, thank you very much for your input. Dr. Muhammad, one issue that we cannot ignore, especially when we see certain footage, human rights. Yeah. Because one of the issues, for example, that is even addressed with Egypt is human rights. What about the human rights of innocent civilians that are given 10 minutes to leave their homes? So basically, it's a matter of leaving your home with what you have on. You don't have even a chance to pack any valuables if you want to survive the attack. What about the right of those people? The right of, we have almost 2,000 that have been injured, over 200 that have been killed. What about the rights of those people that have lost their homes and are living on streets now, or in camps?
Actually deprived of almost all their own simple rights.
What about the rights of the children that were
denied
killed?
And neglected, reacted against actually to a greater extent. This is part of the double dealings and the double standards actually, that those people would act and react through, as much as the American administration is. Our own dear friend actually did say something significant right a few minutes ago, which is about the implementation and the representation of, peaceful ties actually, but this is to outward seeming actually. Deep down they would behave in a way that would seem to be quite totally different. To outward seeming they would propagate actually, and they would investigate how peaceful the nation is, how they would seem to be quite very much kind and very much lenient, as much as to represent through the mics actually. That they would have to leave your own homes, prepare your own valuables and your own collectibles as much as your own little children. Actually, this is to outward seeming, but deep down we'll see actually how, criminal they are and how atrocities that they would commit. And this is something that seems to be very far away from the strategy of the human rights existence actually. Even the simple rights, as you have much rightly said, now the right of the children. Yes. They would propagate that, prepare yourself for living your own homes, collect your own things in no more than a couple of hours. And I see through the videos actually that one of the Palestinian actually guys conversing and discussing some Arabic terminologies with one of the Israeli soldier of a Turkish descent, that I'm not going to leave my own home. Well, I'm going to die at that particular spot, side by side with my very much kind wife, as very dearly beloved children. This is one way of representing how, those people would seem to be quite dealing through the double dealings and the double standards. So they are, far from being represented any sense of simple human rights, which is the simple right of living peacefully, actually, in a land which is not theirs. So it's one way or another, actually, of giving a land to a people that they would not possess, and not the same way that a sort of a liberty or a freedom which is not theirs. So this is double dealings, double strategies, to outward seeming, on the face of it, they would behave peacefully, but deep down they are far from being so, as to be very much propagated every now and again through the videos and the photos here, there, and everywhere.
Dr. Muhammad Al-Halim, thank you very much for joining us
pleasure.
this evening on To The Point. I'd like to thank you, the viewers. We'll see you same time next week. Until then, good night.